Hi guys, so I am trying out a new style of video because I'm getting a little bit bored with the old styles, so let's just experiment a little bit. So in this video, I want to talk about a common misconception about among intermediate learners about one thing that they think would help them to get to fluency, but is actually not the most effective, and that is learning new words. Before we continue, I just want to remind you that if you are a professional who urgently need to use English for work purposes and you need my help to coach you, make sure to apply to my coaching program English Sprint Academy by clicking the link in the description box or the comments. And this is especially good for you who have been stuck in your level for a long time, and despite whatever effort that you've been putting in, you're not improving at all. And this is where I play a role in helping you get out of this plateau. Back to the video. So what is the mistake essentially? Why is learning new words considered to be like a mistake or a misconception? I wouldn't say that this is a mistake. I mean, it's in many cases it's a good thing to learn new words, especially if you're a beginner or an upper beginner or a lower intermediate. But for a lot of people who have a pretty good comprehension of English, let's say if you're intermediate and you're able to understand a piece of content in English 80%, 90%, that means you have a very good comprehension level. And if you're at this stage, you don't need to learn more words. You already know enough words. However, a lot of intermediate learners make this mistake of collecting so many new words without really knowing how to use these words, how to implement it in their daily life. So a lot of people would just collect a very long list of words from, let's say, a piece of content, let's say from movies or books that they read, just write it down and then that's it. But they don't really take the next step of asking themselves, okay, how can I start using them in my life to level up my English? And this is not good because this is going to lead to wasted effort. So all of the time that you spent collecting all of these new words and you don't end up using, it's like, why even do it in the first place if it's not going to directly improve your English significantly, because oftentimes when you collect these new words and you don't review it again, you don't use it at all, you're going to forget them. So if you're going to forget them, you're not going to use it in your day-to-day. Why even bother learning it in the first place? So having said that, how do we solve this problem? So one thing before we get into the how is good to know two things. First, it's good to be aware about the concept of personal phrasebook. What is a personal phrasebook? Basically, a personal phrasebook is, I wouldn't say it's a literal book. It could be a literal book if you want it to be. It's basically a collection of phrases or words that are directly relevant to you. So every person has more or less different phrase books depending on what you need. For instance, someone who works as a waitress would have a different phrase book than someone who worked at IT. And then the second thing that you need to know, let's say in your personal phrase book, is to know the difference between passive vocabulary and active vocabulary. So I talked about it quite in depth about the difference between passive and active vocabulary in this video. But to put it very briefly, passive vocabulary is basically words, vocabulary that you understand if it were being spoken by other people, but you're unable to use it yourself correctly or confidently. Whereas active vocabulary are words or phrases that you can confidently use in your day-to-day. So let's say you're watching a video, let's say this video, and then you understand almost everything that I'm saying right now. You understand every single word, but you are still unable to use these words yourself to articulate things, to express yourself. So that means that one of the reasons that might be is because like the words that I'm using is not necessarily in your active vocabulary yet. So I hope that you know the difference more or less. Now, fluency. Let's talk about fluency. Fluency is not necessarily knowing more words, having more vocabulary in your phrase book, but it's essentially about having more vocabulary as your active vocabulary. It's about expanding your active vocabulary by using words effectively and connecting them naturally in conversations. So, think about it this way. If you're collecting a list of words and then you put it in your passive vocabulary, sure, you may know a lot of words, but you don't really know how to use them day to day, right? In order for you to become fluent, you have to kind of work on your passive vocabulary and to become active vocabulary. How can you transfer more words in your passive vocabulary into the active vocabulary? It's about expanding your active vocabulary. Now, how do we expand our active vocabulary? So this is where a lot of people make the mistake. They would collect a lot of words, let's say from a piece of content, and then they would think, okay, I've collected a lot and this would automatically be transferred into my active vocabulary. That's not the case. A lot of times you learn these words, they may become your passive vocabulary, they may improve your comprehension by knowing all of these words, but in order for it to become an active vocabulary that would help your fluency, it needs to be processed. And the processing from passive to active vocabulary, you could do a couple of exercises. Now, when you collect new words, be sure to be critical and selective of the words and phrases that you're collecting. Do not just collect whatever phrases that you don't understand, but be selective in the sense that you need to think, okay, these phrases are interesting. Can I start using it in my day-to-day? How can I start using this to improve my English? In what situation in my life can I start using this English phrase or words? So that's step one. Be critical when you're collecting new phrases or words. Number two, when you're collecting, if you find an interesting vocab, also be critical. Okay, this word seems to be relevant to my life. Should I learn it just to increase my passive vocabulary and comprehension, or should I start using this in my active vocabulary? So think about whether this new word or phrase is going to stay in your passive vocabulary, or is it going to eventually become an active vocabulary for you. And number three, in order to process a word from being a passive vocabulary to an active vocabulary, you need to do a lot of output practice as much as possible. So output practice could be in the form of writing, let's say writing journals or diary or an essay, or speaking practice. And speaking practice, I always recommend my clients to do vlogging. So this, what I'm doing right now, is basically vlogging, which is recording myself speaking to the camera. So a real life exercise could be like this. Let's say you find a video on YouTube and then you're learning new things, and you might even start learning new words or new phrases that you want to start using. So you collect these relevant pieces of phrases or words, and then once you have a list of these vocabulary and phrases, you're gonna put your camera on or your phone on and start recording yourself summarizing this video that you just watched using these new words and phrases that you just collected. So this is the easiest, most straightforward and fastest way for you to expand your active vocabulary. So now you know why collecting new words just for the sake of collecting words isn't always going to lead to improvement, to fluency. Now I want to challenge you to implement the knowledge that you got from this video immediately. So now that you've watched this video, I want to encourage you to re-watch it again and start collecting new words or phrases that you think that you can start using in your day-to-day. So once you've made a list, next step is to challenge yourself for output practice. So this could be either journaling or writing or vlogging like this. Record yourself speaking to the camera and summarize what you learned from this video. So yes, let me know if you have done this exercise in the comments below. I hope that you learned something new, and I'll see you next week in another video. Until then, take care and good luck.